Has this ever happened to you?
Ugh, I hate it when my custom keyboard that costs hundreds of dollars can't cut food. If only there was a way for me to be able to cut food with my custom keyboard.
Alright, so today's project is very simple. We're gonna turn a keyboard into a knife. Now there's multiple ways I could have done this. The first one was actually just taping a knife to a keyboard, but that would have been cheating. It's not allowed. I also thought about melting all the aluminum and pouring it into a mold, but I don't know how to do that, and I also don't own a furnace, so quite impractical as well. So that left me with one option. Keyboard plates. I could theoretically cut my way through the plate and make it into the shape of a knife and then sharpen the edge so that it was sharp enough to become a knife. So I don't actually own any metal cutting equipment, so I went out of my way and bought a hacksaw as well as a professional die grinder. So I've already figured out that this is gonna be the handle, like right here. I don't want the knife to be like too hollow or too fragile. I also want it to have some rigidity. Mode, if you're watching, I'm sorry. Alright, so the first thing I have to do is cut the plate into the shape of a knife. I got some knives from my kitchen for reference, and I used a pencil to draw the general outline. I wanted to use the plate as much as possible, so I first opted for a cleaver shape and made the overall blade a little bit wider than usual. And once I got the general outline drawn, it was time to start cutting the plate into the shape of a knife. But before that, we have to dress up.
Wait, that's sorry. So stupid.
So with my protective gear on, I headed outside and started cutting with my hacksaw. Using a hacksaw is pretty easy. Just screw the blade on and start cutting and... Oh, okay. My bad. Let me just screw it back on. That was probably my fault. Alright, like I was saying, using a hacksaw is pretty easy. Just gotta go back and forth and...
What the?
And this was the moment when I realized I probably shouldn't have bought cheap hardware online. This hacksaw kept falling apart every single time, and it was not very fun at all. I even tried to use the die grinder, but it wasn't fully equipped to cut aluminium, so it didn't really do much at all. I had no other choice but to keep using my crappy hacksaw. I was seriously considering giving up at this point, but I kept going, because if I could saw this plate, then 68.3% of you can subscribe. So I finished cutting out the original plan for the knife, but it felt a little too large, so I trimmed it down to make it closer to the shape of an actual knife. And once the plate had been fully cut, all I had to do was trim the edges on the blade for a better finish. So I used my die cutter and sandpaper to flatten the blade.
So long.
Alright, now that we have the general shape of the knife cut out, we have to focus on actually making it sharp. So thankfully, I have some experience with sharpening knives. My mom always complains about blunt knives in the kitchen, so over the past year, I've been learning how to sharpen knives for her to make cooking a lot easier. There are many ways to sharpen knives, but one of the best ways is to use a whetstone. Whetstones are fine stones with different grits that help to remove metal from your knife. Lower grit whetstones are rougher and are typically used to form an edge and repair chipped knives. Whetstones with higher grits are much finer and are used to refine the knife edge to make it sharper. Unfortunately, my knife edge is so messed up that I don't think I can even use a whetstone yet. So I'm going to start off by using the stone block to flatten the edge as much as possible. This process took a good 10 to 15 minutes because the knife edge was really uneven. But once the knife edge is relatively smooth and even, we can finally move on to the whetstones. Before using any of my whetstones, I like to soak mine in water for a few minutes. And after they've been soaked, it's also a good idea to flatten it with another stone. I'm using a pencil to mark some lines which will indicate when the whetstone is relatively flat. You're meant to make it completely flat, but I'm kinda lazy, so I just keep going until it's just flat enough. So we're starting off with a 400 grit whetstone to get rid of any chipped edges and to start forming the triangular knife shape. Once I feel like the edge has begun to form, I move on to the 1000 grit whetstone. And then I move on to the 2000 grit whetstone. And after that, I move on to the 5000 grit whetstone. And finally, I move on to the 8000 grit whetstone to polish the knife. And after 1 to 2 hours of sharpening, we have the finished product. Visually, it looks really nice, but let's see how it actually performs. So let's start off with the paper test. Here you can see the knife before it was sharpened, and it absolutely sucked at cutting. And here's the knife after it was sharpened.
Oh my god.
I was genuinely surprised at how well it cut through the paper. It is actually pretty sharp. So next up we have the fruit test. The first fruit we're gonna cut is a banana. I also have my actual knife with me so we can see how it measures up to a proper kitchen knife. And as expected, the kitchen knife cuts through like it's nothing. But what about my keyboard knife? Let's see if it cuts. Alright, so far it can cut bananas pretty good. Let's move on to our next fruit. Let's see if my keyboard knife can cut through a lemon. So far so good, 2 for 2. The keyboard knife can cut through a lemon, which I'm pretty proud of. For the next fruit, we have something a little bit tougher, an apple. Alright, for the next and final fruit, we have a watermelon. It takes a little bit of effort, but it can cut through a watermelon, which is pretty cool.
Alright.
And for the final test, we're gonna try cut some water bottles. Yeah, so I may have tried a little too hard and I ended up bending the knife. Alright, there you have it. I turned my keyboard into a knife. I'm actually really happy with how the knife turned out. It looks hilarious, but it can cut really well. Anyways guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Hamaji and join my Discord server, discord.gg/Hamaji. You can also become a member like these amazing people and be featured at the end of the video. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
If only there was a way to make... If only there was a way...